more people are getting diabetes because there's a marked increase in the proportion of adults who are becoming obese. From 1993, there was 13% of men that were obese, and now in 2003, more than a quarter of men are now obese at 26%. For women, the increase has gone from 16% to just under a quarter, 24%. So the situation is getting worse. There has been an increased proportion of children who are becoming obese in year 6, which is 10 to 11-year-olds. It peaked in 2004, where 19.5% were obese. It's dropped slightly to 17.5%, and that's directly linked with the increased number of people getting type 2 diabetes. Prediabetes is where your blood sugar level is higher than normal but not high enough to be diagnosed with diabetes. People that are more likely to get prediabetes are those people that are overweight or obese. Also for women if they've got a waist measurement over 80 centimetres, and for men if they've got a waist measurement over 94 centimetres. Also people that have a family history of diabetes, or if they are from South Asian, African, Caribbean or Chinese background, they've got an increased risk as well. About 5 to 10% of people with prediabetes do go on to develop type 2 diabetes. However, 80% of type 2 diabetes could be delayed or prevented by making lifestyle changes. The biggest things to change if you have prediabetes is really to lose weight, and what we're aiming for is a 5 to 10% weight loss, and this is usually about a stone to 2 stone for most people. Also increasing physical activity, the recommended is 150 minutes per week, and also smoking cessation. As a dietitian, what I would do is assess your diet and physical activity levels, and also your motivation to change, because it's so important that people are in the right mindset to make changes. And then we'd agree a way forward. Most people find that planning meals and also eating regular meals is one of the key changes to make. For patients that are struggling with portion sizes, the portion control plans are really beneficial, and we're aiming to cut the intake by 600 calories per day. Or it might be just setting small, realistic steps. So it could be, taking a 30-minute walk on Tuesday and Thursday, for instance. And we normally recommend not setting more than 3 to 4 goals in a session. Well, based on your age, weight and sex, I'd work out your energy requirements, and then I'd deduct 600 calories. Then I would do a menu plan, and it's based on the number of portions from the different food groups. So, for instance, it could be 5 portions from the fruit and vegetable group, and a portion of fruit is basically what fits in the palm of your hand. And then obviously the starchy carbohydrates, you'd have so many portions, at least 5 from there. And then the dairy and the protein, and the smaller section should be from the foods high in fat and sugar. So a good diet for people with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes is basically a healthy, balanced diet that's low in fat and sugar and salt, and rich in fruit and vegetables. So the steps to a healthy diet are basically, the first most important step is eating regular meals containing starchy carbohydrates such as bread, potatoes, cereal. And if you can, try and go for the whole grain versions, those with a low GI, for instance, things like basmati rice, oat-based cereals like porridge. The next step is really to reduce your fat intake. Fat is the most concentrated source of calories in your diet. So that's why it's key to reducing that, and particularly saturated fat, so things like ghee, butter, cream. And what you try and do is then replace those with lower fat versions such as semi-skimmed or skim milk. The next step is really to increase your fruit and vegetables intake, because they're really low in calories and they can really fill you up. So as I mentioned before, a portion of fruit really is like an apple, fits in the palm of your hand, or about 3 tablespoons of vegetables. And then the next step is to cut the sugar intake down, particularly sugary foods and drinks such as fizzy drinks, sweets and chocolates. Again, they're high in calories and they don't have any nutritional value. The next step is to reduce salt intake. It's recommended that you have no more than 6 grams per day, which is only about a teaspoon. So trying to banish the salt cellar from the table, avoid adding it in cooking, and also processed foods have a lot of salt in them as well. And the final step is to reduce alcohol. The alcohol recommendations for men are 3 to 4 units per day, and for women 2 to 3. And it's really important to have alcohol-free days as well. A unit is basically a pub measure of spirits, a very small glass of wine, or half a pint of lager. The Eatwell plate's a really useful tool. It basically shows that a third of your intake should come from fruit and vegetables, a third from starchy carbohydrates such as bread, potatoes, pasta, about a sixth from the protein foods such as like meat, fish, chicken, eggs and beans, and about a sixth from the dairy products, things like milk and yogurts. And the remaining section should be the smallest part, which is the foods high in fat and sugar. So if you're overweight, what you're aiming to do is lose between about 5 and 10% of your initial body weight, which often means about a stone to 2 stone for most people. So what we do is goal setting, and the recommended is that we don't set more than 3 to 4 goals per session, and that the goals are achievable and they're sustainable. There's no point making changes and only being able to stick it for a month, but they must be permanent lifestyle changes. And by goal setting, what you're aiming to do is then form habits. So these then just become incorporated into your lifestyle. As a dietitian, we don't recommend the diabetic products such as the diabetic chocolate and sweets that you can buy in the pharmacy. Often people complain after eating diabetic sweets and chocolates that they get diarrhea, and that's caused by the sweetener in the products, that they have a laxative effect. So the diet doesn't have to be totally sugar-free. It is good to substitute high sugary foods like fizzy drinks with the diet versions, but a small amount of sugar is absolutely fine, especially if it's incorporated as part of a meal. So pre-diabetes increases the risk of developing type 2 diabetes and other health complications such as heart disease and stroke. And when you develop type 2 diabetes, there's increased risk of complications such as affecting like your nerves, your eyes, your kidneys. The important thing, though, is that type 2 diabetes is preventable, and that's what we're trying to achieve by making lifestyle changes. Yeah, so type 2 diabetes isn't caused by eating too many sugary foods or drinks. However, if you eat too many sugary foods and fatty foods, then you'll gain weight, and that can increase your risk of developing type 2 diabetes.